The first Predator film dropped all the way back in 1987, and it was the first studio picture from director John McTiernan, who you might also know for directing the first and third Die Hard films. The initial idea at the time was a team of badass 80s action dudes coming face to face with something even they were scared of. The series has gone on to spawn 3 sequels and 2 spin-off films, none of which were ever received with especially glowing praise, but only 2 of which I would classify personally as bad movies, in my own personal opinion. I recently purchased the original and the most recent Predator films, and decided to watch them for the first time, and I think I kind of love this series. Don't get me wrong, the series has its ups and downs, but when it hits, hot damn does it hit. And since I just got done discussing 2 fairly heavy films, I thought I'd talk about a series of films that is much less complicated, even at its best, even at its worst. But I also decided I'd rather just do this in 2 small bursts rather than do an extended series discussing 6 different movies. So instead, I'm only doing 2 videos with my more abridged thoughts on each movie. This video will discuss the Predator series proper, and the next one will discuss the Alien vs. Predator series. So, let's start at the beginning and work our way up.
Now, shall we begin?
We already went over the general idea of this movie, so let's dig into the actual story, which starts with a CIA agent named Dylan, played by one Carl Weathers of Rocky fame, approaching his old pal Dutch, played by the legendary Arnold Schwarzenegger, about a mission in a Guatemalan jungle. Said mission involves Dylan, Dutch, and Dutch's team busting a cocaine den and taking in as many prisoners as he can. Which ends up being 1, except that's not why Dylan really sent them in. Dylan had previously sent in other mercenary and U.S. Army units to tackle a different issue in this jungle. Hi, this is Woodstock for the Future, here to tell you that Dutch and his team weren't in Guatemala because they were busting a cocaine cartel. They were there to find a guerrilla compound and locate a foreign dignitary that had been kidnapped by said guerrilla fighters. And that the reason Dylan called them in was just because he wanted those cartel fighters out of the way. Or not cartel fighters, guerrilla fighters. They were revolutionaries, not drug dealers. I'm a moron. The issue in question turns out to be an alien hunter with cloaking technology, energy weapons, and retractable wrist blades. Said hunter ends up systematically killing every member of our party, save for Dutch and a Guatemalan woman his team had taken prisoner named Anna. Dutch eventually notices that the alien is only preying on anyone with a weapon, and that it seems to only be able to see in infrared. In other words, it can only see body heat. Dutch eventually manages to trap the Predator and kill it, but not before it leaves our main character a parting gift, in the form of a personal nuclear explosion. Dutch and Anna manage to get away without being blown to Kingdom Come, though, and the film closes with Dutch on board a chopper from the CIA, seemingly trying to process just what the hell he witnessed. The first Predator is one of those rare movies that you instantly understand why it's a classic. The creature designed by the great Stan Winston, who also created the designs for The Terminator, Avatar, Iron Man, and Jurassic Park, is worth the cost of admission alone or the cost of the DVD, but toss in John McTiernan's mastery of tension building, the immediately iconic lines, the score by Alan Silvestri, the genuinely fantastic performance from Arnold as well as Bill Duke, and a kick-ass Little Richard track, and you've got yourself a pretty darn sweet action flick from the late 1980s. The only thing I'd really dig the movie for is the fact that, personally, I don't think the first half is as nearly interesting as the second half is. When Dutch forces Anna to flee so we can face the Predator alone, the movie shifts from pretty good to absolutely fantastic. I'd also note that most of the Shane Black character's pussy jokes aren't really as funny as Shane might have thought they were. Like, they're only really funny in that they're such odd things to say, not really because they're anything especially clever. But that said, I'm gonna go big, and I'm gonna give John McTiernan's Predator a 4 out of 5. The first Predator movie made $98 million on an $18 million budget. That's about a $222 million profit against a $42 million budget in today's money. In other words, the movie was a smash hit, making 5 times its budget back, so naturally, Fox went up to Jim and John Thomas and said, "You boys want to do a sequel?" Said boys came back with about 6 ideas. But the one the executives took the most liking to was putting the Predator in the concrete jungle. There's no word on whether John McTiernan was asked to come back or not, but I suspect Fox knew he probably wouldn't be available after he just signed the dotted line for a little movie from Paramount called The Hunt for Red October. So, Joel Silver, the legendary producer of both the first Predator and also works like The Warriors, Brewster's Millions, Weird Science, Commando, Lethal Weapon 1, 2, 3, and 4, Die Hard 1 and 2, Demolition Man, Richie Rich, the Matrix trilogy, V for Vendetta, both of the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock films, The Nice Guys, as well as a bunch of other movies. He opted to approach Nightmare on Elm Street 5 director Stephen Hopkins after having also produced his first film, Dangerous Game, a movie about a deranged police officer turned security guard stalking trespassers inside a closed shopping mall, which actually sounds like a pretty decent audition tape for a Predator sequel. But an impressive audition tape does not mean an impressive performance. Let's chat about the actual story and then comment on if Hopkins' movie actually stuck the landing. Our story focuses on an LAPD lieutenant named Mike Harrigan, played by Danny Glover. His team of detectives is looking to put a stop to a gang war between rival Colombian and Jamaican gangs. Their conflict is put on pause by 2 new players, another Predator on the hunt, and a group of CIA agents posing as members of the DEA, led by a special agent by the name of Peter Keyes, played by Gary Busey, who are looking to capture said Predator. The Predator soon walks in on the Jamaicans assassinating the leader of the Colombians, who then try and fail to take him down, assuming that he's a rival. The LAPD then walk in on the scene left behind and attempt to investigate what happened, but are blocked by the DEA boys. The Predator makes several more attacks, which leaves 2 of Harrigan's detectives killed and 1 put in the hospital. Furious that some assholes come after his people, Harrigan runs after the Predator, but is intercepted by Keyes' agents outside a meatpacking facility. Keyes recounts the events of the first film from Dutch and Anna's perspective, and explains that they want to capture the Predator for his technology. Keyes and his agents try to corner the Predator inside the facility by cloaking their heat signatures, and finding a method to decloak the Predator. This works, but the Predator catches onto the trick and switches to a different light spectrum to see the agents and goes to town on them. Harrigan intervenes to save Keyes and even wounds the Predator, but Keyes ends up killed anyway. Harrigan retreats and is pursued by the Predator, eventually leading to the 2 of them hanging off the ledge of the facility. The Predator calls it a loss and attempts to blow himself and Harrigan up like the first Predator tried with Dutch back in the first movie. But Harrigan takes one of the Predator's weapons and uses it to slice their hand off and cut their device in half, stopping the clock on their bomb. This also causes our Predator to fall off the ledge, which leads to them making their own retreat. Fueled by vengeance and a desire to make sure this creature won't hurt anyone else. Harrigan follows the Predator to his ship and finally kills the bastard. The police lieutenant is then confronted by several more Predators who quietly take away their fallen comrade's body, while their chief, in recognition of their skill as a hunter, tosses Harrigan a flintlock pistol from 1715. Harrigan then makes his way home, but is confronted by a CIA agent for letting the Predator get away. Finally realizing what he just witnessed, the cop simply smirks and says, "Don't worry, asshole, you'll get another chance." And credits roll. So I'm going to drop a hot take here. Not only did Stephen Hopkins stick the landing, he actually surpassed the original in my opinion. I complained that outside of the actual Predator, the story of the first Predator is a little bit on the dull side. The story of Predator 2 ultimately revolves completely around the Predator. Someone's picking off cops and cartel members? Why? What do they want? Who are they? And what does the federal government want with them? And the answers to these questions are, why not? 2, to hunt. 3, an alien, and 4, to study their tech. And while it was awesome seeing Schwarzenegger outthink the original Predator and trick them into falling into his trap, seeing a vengeance-fueled Danny Glover stalk the Predator and brutally murder it is even more awesome. And on top of that, while the side characters from the first Predator are wonderfully quotable, I think the side characters from Predator 2 are actually more interesting. The side characters in the first Predator are mostly just smart-ass grunts, while the side characters in Predator 2 are actually reasonably clever and actually kind of funny. And moreover, these people aren't U.S. Special Forces. They're cops. The characters in Predator are the toughest men alive. Even if they're out of their depth, they can find a way to huddle up and find a way through. The characters in Predator 2 have been in a few firefights, but they're not trained to deal with skilled people, let alone with frickin' aliens. They're trained to pop a few caps in the ass of a gangbanger hopped up on cocaine or heroin or PCP. Yet they're still gonna stare down a creature who literally tore up a whole room of cartel boys like it was nothing. To put it bluntly, that takes serious balls. I'm going to give Predator 2 a 5 out of 5. And yes, you did just hear me right. Also, one more thing before we move on. This is actually the second to last film role from Kevin Peter Hall, the gentleman who actually portrayed the Predator in both this and the original Predator film. This is the only real role I know him for, but it takes a lot of skill to provide a convincing performance under so much makeup and prosthetics. He sadly passed away a month before his 36th birthday, a year after this film's release in 1991, after having contracted HIV/AIDS from a blood transfusion in the middle of his run on the sitcom Harry and the Hendersons. Bill Paxton, who had a supporting role in this film, sadly passed away as well in February of 2017 at the age of 61 after complications from heart surgery. Paxton was always a delightful presence in films of any sort and television, particularly so for this movie. Amusingly, Bill Paxton is also the only actor to have been killed by a Predator, a Xenomorph, and a Terminator, having famously had roles in both Aliens and a small role in the first Terminator film. And finally, this is also the great Stan Winston's last time working on the Predator series, having died in June 2008 from a form of blood cancer at the age of 62. And also having not returned for the Alien vs. Predator films. Without Stan's incredible work, we don't have any of the amazing creatures and machines from some iconic films. Hell, we might not have the MCU without this man. He found a way to turn Iron Man from a neat drawing in a comic book into something real. Without this awesome dude, we don't have the Terminator, simultaneously one of the most iconic heroes and villains in cinema history, and without him, we wouldn't have the Predator. Kevin, Bill, and Stan are all dearly missed, and will all rest in peace. The world is always a poorer place when talented people have to leave it, and these three men are no exception. In 1994, while making his second ever feature film, Desperado, Robert Rodriguez, who I previously mentioned in my review for his most recent film, Alita Battle Angel, approached Fox with a pitch for a third Predator movie. Fox said no at the time, seeing as how the script would cost way too much money to film, but 15 years later, someone found the old script, blew the dust off it, and went, "Holy shit, yes! Yes! So they called up old Robbie Boy and said, "Hey, let's make this happen." Well, Rodriguez himself is a producer on the film, and the project was worked on by his own Troublemaker Studios, so Robert Rodriguez's thumb is pressed down on this scale. Rodriguez himself chose not to direct the film, likely because he was busy with his own original film, Machete. Instead, the gig was allocated to Hungarian-American filmmaker Nimrod Antal. I can't find any info about Mr. Antal beyond the fact that his previous two American films, while not despised, weren't very well received by critics and didn't make bank at the box office either, with his 2007 movie Vacancy scoring $35.3 million on a $19 million budget, and his 2009 movie Armored making $23.6 million on a $20 million budget. Though, to be somewhat fair, that last one may not be his fault, since Sony accidentally leaked Armored on the PlayStation Network for several weeks. Whoops. I think the honest-to-God reason that Rodriguez hired Antal was for two reasons. One, most of his work before this was highlighted in reviews for his B-movie aesthetic, and that was mostly in a complimentary manner. And this is an aesthetic that would fit very well with a Predator movie. And two, Antal, to be a little bit mean about it, is a filmmaker without much clout, experience, or buzz around him. He'd be fairly easy to control and likely wouldn't go against Robert's vision for the film. And while I have no way to confirm this, I'm only speculating after all, what I can confirm to you is that Robert Rodriguez's vision was
awesome.
Our story starts with Royce, an American mercenary, falling through the sky and making a parachute landing in the middle of a jungle. Royce is soon met with a Mexican gangster named Cuchillo, a Russian Spetsnaz commando named Nikolai, a death row inmate from California named Stans, a Sierra Leonean terrorist named Mombasa, an Israeli sniper named Isabel, a civilian doctor from America named Edwin, and finally, a Japanese gangster named Hanzo. The group are rather confused about their situation since none of them know each other, we're all in the middle of different activities, have no idea how they arrived in this place or where this place even is. Then they realize that none of them recognize the jungle because none of them have ever or could ever visit this jungle because this jungle is not on Earth, and neither are they. After a violent encounter with a pack of alien dogs that ends up with Cuchillo being killed, Royce pieces together that this jungle is a game preserve and that they're all the game. The group ventures further out and we finally meet a predator, only said predator is tied to a post in the middle of a seemingly abandoned camp. A trap is then sprung, which leads to Mombasa being killed also, and alerts the other three predators, who are bigger and meaner than any of the predators that we've met before now. The remaining six flee to safety, where Isabel explains that she's actually heard of these creatures before, having read Dutch's report of the original Guatemalan mission, explaining that the predators see in infrared, and the Dutch got around it by covering himself in mud. Royce then decides to keep moving and set up traps for the predators so they can take care of the threat before finding a way back home. The group is then alerted to the presence of another human in the wilderness named Nolan, who circumvents their traps. Nolan invites the group into his compound. While everyone is recuperating and stocking up on ammo and new weapons, Nolan mentions that there's actually a spaceship a few yards out from the predator camp, and that the reason the smaller predator was tied up was because there's actually a blood feud going on between the different predator clans. Royce in turn suggests that they actually free the smaller predator and use him to get them all off this damn rock. Nolan seems unconvinced, but leaves them to rest, or so the group thinks. What he actually does is sneak out of his hideout and attempts to kill all the other humans by funneling smoke into the room. Thinking quickly, Royce fires into a wall facing the outside, alerting the predators to their presence. In turn, The Predators kill Nolan and allow Royce and company to escape so that they can chase them more. During their escape, though, Edwin, the civilian doctor, loses his way and gets separated from the group. Nikolai the Russian runs after Edwin to rescue him, but is caught by a Predator in the process. He manages to stall it long enough for Edwin to escape, and once his ally is safe, he sets off a grenade, killing himself and his enemy. Once outside, though, the group are confronted by the leader of the Predators, but before they can do anything, he's stalled by being stabbed repeatedly by Stans, the inmate from California. The rest of the group flees without Stans, who is promptly killed by the Predator. Hanzo, the Japanese gangster, decides to stay behind also when he senses that the third Predator is on their tail. He challenges the Predator to a duel, Hanzo's blade versus the Predator's. Said duel results in Hanzo killing the Predator, but the Predator also killing Hanzo. As Royce, Edwin, and Isabel, the Israeli sniper, flee, we see Edwin get his foot caught in a trap. Royce, being a mercenary, is perfectly fine leaving Edwin behind, but as a real soldier, Isabel refuses to leave her comrade behind under any circumstances. So the trio splits up, with Royce heading to the Predator camp to free the Predator prisoner so he can get them the hell off this fucking planet, and Isabel and Edwin try to find a way to just lay low for a bit, but are caught by the leader of the Predator hunting party. Once free, the prisoner gears up for a fight with his captor, while Royce runs with the ship. The fight ends with the leader killing his captive and initiating the self-destruct sequence on board his ship, destroying it with Royce on board. We move back to Isabel and Edwin, with Isabel saying she'll either find a way out for them, or she'll give Edwin and herself a quick and painless death so that they won't have to suffer whatever the Predator has in store for them. Edwin replies that he won't be giving her a quick or painless death before cutting her with a neurotoxin-coated scalpel, which instantly paralyzes Isabel. Edwin then explains that back home, he's a murderer. He's always felt like a freak. But here, among the other monsters, he feels normal. And then he wants to stay. Before he can do anything else to Isabel, though, he's stopped by Royce, who never actually boarded the ship. Royce sticks Edwin with his own poisoned scalpel and sets him up with more grenades from Nolan's hideout. The final Predator then comes across the Edwin trap, which, while not killing him, does disorient the crap out of him. Royce then takes a page from Dutch's book and runs up to the Predator covered in mud, but mixes it up by surrounding the camp in a ring of fire, leaving the Predator confused as to where Royce actually is. This allows Royce to make several good hits on the Predator with a hatchet before finally being caught by him. Thankfully, Royce is saved when Isabel regains enough motor function to fire her rifle at the Predator, further disabling them. Now free, Royce goes to town on the creature who made him a prisoner, bashing its head in before finally removing said head from the Predator's body with the same hatchet. Isabel and Royce then relax after so many hours of so much violence, before waking up to the sight of more crates parachuting in, with presumably more game for the Predators. In the 20 years between Predator 2 and Predators, the Predator franchise has been in a weird place. While the Predators were being seen in cinemas in the years between, with Alien vs. Predator in 2004 and Aliens vs. Predator Requiem in 2007, the Predator series really hadn't been allowed to stand on its own 2 feet in the intervening period. So whatever your feelings on this movie are, I think we can all send a shout out to Robert Rodriquez for revitalizing the Predator series outside of the Alien series. And on the matter of Robert's movie, I'd say Robert and director Nimrod Antel actually came out with a fairly unique and fresh take on the Predator series, in that it flips the script. The Predators don't go to the humans, they bring the humans to them. And moreover, this isn't a unit of people who love and respect each other. They're all strangers who just met each other this morning. Which actually leads to a trope I really like. People having to work together for their own self-interest, even if they have no connection or personal obligation to each other. And as far as the actual cast goes, I actually really like everyone. I've heard a lot of people criticize the casting of Adrian Brody as Royce, and honestly, I don't agree with that. I think Brody does a really good job as an action star. He looks right, holding a really big gun. He got himself in really good shape for the role. Well, and when he's given a scene where he needs to be physical, he sells it pretty darn well. And as a character, I like how Royce is constantly moving back and forth between a selfish desire for survival and a selfless desire to help everyone else. His first instinct is to just cover his own ass, but when push comes to shove, he can't bring himself to cross the line. He has to turn around and help, unlike Alice Braga's Isabel, whose first and only instinct is to be selfless even at the cost of her own self-interest. Like I mentioned in the summary, when Edwin has his foot caught in a booby trap, Royce instantly sees that he's a liability now and determines that the best thing to do is to turn Edwin himself into a trap for the predators. And Isabel says, fuck that, he's a human being, and what's the point of surviving if you're going to turn your back on a fellow human? And when absolutely forced to turn her back on someone, she'll at least try to offer a courtesy of some sort for them. When Cuchillo is caught by the predators, the group insists he's a dead man. Isabel, knowing that she can't save him, simply shoots him in the back so that he won't be tortured by the predators. The rest of the cast all have their own thing as well. Stan's is a little crazy, Nikolai, Mombasa, and Hanzo are all quiet, stoic types, with Nikolai still being fairly approachable. Mombasa seems quiet because he's realized he's done a lot of fucked up shit and knows that if there's an afterlife, he's probably going to the bad place, which is done awesomely by the great Mahershala Ali. And Hanzo is quiet just because he doesn't want to say anything stupid that'll make him lose another finger when he gets home. Edwin is the subject of lots of jokes about how he is not qualified at all to be running from alien monsters on an alien jungle planet, which I think still works even when it turns out he's a serial killer. Or, a serial killer, they're sneaky. They'll come up on you in the middle of a parking lot, they'll come up to you at a party and spike your drink. They're not someone who are an actual fighter. Or they need to sneak up on you. They need to surprise you in order to do anything to you. And Cuchillo is Danny Trejo, so he's automatically the second coolest character in the movie. And Nolan is Lawrence Fishburne, so he's automatically the absolute coolest character in the movie. And while I personally don't care for the design of the Berserker Predator's base, the leader of the Predator clan, I really love the design of his actual armor along with his buddies. And the classic Predator space is a dead ringer for the OG Predator from 1987. And I actually really like that his armor is kind of dented and scratched up because he was probably in a fight before he was strung up that, led to him being strung up. If Predator 2 wasn't your cup of tea, Predators is definitely the sequel you're looking for. It broadens the outlook of the series while also staying true to the original concept of the first movie, and in my opinion, like Predator 2, it actually tops the first movie. The only real quibbles I have are two things. One, earlier in the movie, Stans complains that he's the only person capable of defending himself that doesn't have a gun, and he yells for someone to just let him have one, and no one does. Why? We see that Mombasa, Isabel, and Cuchillo, at least, all have sidearms in addition to their long-range weapons. Why not let him and Edwin borrow a pistol so that they can actually protect themselves instead of just having to run away? And also, two, the whole sequence with Nolan really is a waste. As much as I love Lawrence Fishburne, I'm really not sure what point there is to that sequence beyond just letting Royce and company know, oh hey, the Predators have a spaceship here. Oh, and that one Predator you saw strung up, yeah, he doesn't actually like those other guys, so he might help you. Who knows? I don't know. And I think they could have probably found out that information on their own. And I think it would have been best if Fishburne's Nolan was just a member of the group proper in some way. But all that aside, I'm going to give Predators a 4.5 out of 5. Shane Black really made me mad with this movie. Not because I didn't like the movie, although I don't, but because of what Shane did to this franchise with his actions behind the scenes. So, in case you didn't know, Shane Black has an actor friend who goes by the name of Steve Wilder. And back in 2010, old Stevie got caught sending explicit emails to a 14-year-old girl, and got rightly labeled a sex offender for it. But old Shane will always stand by his friends no matter what they do, even if they do bad things. So he managed to get Steve a minor role in Iron Man 3, The Nice Guys, and The Predator. And you know what else all these movies have in common? They each have a main character portrayed by an actor who was under the age of 15 during filming. That would be Ty Simpkins from 2013's Iron Man 3 and Angourie Rice from 2016's The Nice Guys, who were both born in 2001. Jacob Tremblay from 2018's The Predator was born in 2006. Now let me ask you, whether or not it's appropriate for Steve Wilder to be on a film set at all, is it appropriate for him to be on the set of the same film that stars underage actors? If you answered no, congratulations on being a decent human being. If you answered yes, please fuck off immediately and do not visit my channel ever again. I'm serious, don't ever come back here. Now, thankfully, Olivia Munn, who co-starred here and also in 2016's X-Men Apocalypse, caught wind of this situation, and after her own experience of being harassed by another director by the name of Brett Ratner, she alerted 20th Century Fox, who in turn demanded that Wilder be removed from the film. But word on the street is, Wilder's scenes were actually important to the story, so a lot of other points had to be changed or edited out or reshot in order to accommodate for the absence of this subplot, which sucks. But you know how that could have been avoided, Shane? Not hiring your friend, the real-life Predator, for a role in your big blockbuster a year after Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey got busted. Though to be somewhat fair, more reshoots were also filmed because Black wasn't satisfied with the daytime shots of the CGI Predator, so he filmed some nighttime action scenes of it to make the Predator more intimidating. It wasn't terribly effective in my opinion. But with all that said, let's discuss the plot, which starts with an army unit coming across a crashed Predator shuttle in Mexico, and all but one member being brutally murdered by the ship's pilot. The sole survivor is a sniper named Quinn McKenna, played by Boyd Holbrook, who previously played Donald Pierce in Logan. Quinn manages to take the Predator down by using some of its weapons from the crash, then heads into town to send the equipment back home. It's found by his autistic son Rory, played by Jacob Tremblay, who actually manages to figure the technology out. Meanwhile, we move over to a mysterious private think tank called Stargazer, led by a man named Traeger, played by Sterling K. Brown, who have actually captured the Predator from the start of the film. Sterling K. Brown 1, Gary Busey 0. Traeger then brings in Dr. Casey Beckett, played by Olivia Munn, to study the creature. The doctor requests to actually speak to Quinn, who has now returned to the US and been subject to a court-martial for his involvement with what happened in Mexico. But unfortunately for everyone who isn't part of the main cast, the Predator wakes up, escapes the facility with the rest of his armor and weapons. Both Quinn and Dr. Beckett try to attempt to catch up to the creature, Quinn to kill it, Brackett to recapture it, and both fail. Eventually, the duo come together and meet up with Quinn's son. The trio eventually corner the Predator, who makes quick work of them, and Quinn tries to buy his and everyone else's life by offering him some of his stuff back. The Predator tries to leave, but is confronted by a fellow Predator, one much bigger and even stronger than himself. The Super Predator makes short work of his counterpart, who he describes as a traitor. Quinn, Brackett, Quinn's son, Traeger, and the rest of Traeger's men then head for a mining complex where the first Predator's ship was hidden by Stargazer. The Super Predator, in turn, makes quick work of the nameless mooks and explains via a translator that all he wants is the person called McKenna, and that the humans have 7.5 minutes to run before he blows up the traitor's ship. The rest of the humans then make their exit, but are still caught by the Super Predator, who kills even more of Traeger's men, along with Quinn and Brackett's friends, who I haven't mentioned yet. Quinn eventually opts to hand himself over, but the Super Predator completely ignores him in favor of his son, who they believe is the next step in human evolution. Quinn runs after the Super Predator and eventually forces his ship down, forcing him back onto land. Quinn, Brackett, and Rory eventually take the big asshole down with a combo of a Predator arm cannon and a good old-fashioned human grenade. We then cut to a few months later, with Quinn now re-enlisted, Rory working for Stargazer, and Rory now being supervised by the US Army. The scientists at Stargazer then unlock access to an advanced power armor left behind by the first Predator, which Quinn calls dibs on. Did that sound cool? Kind of? Yeah? Well, a plot description only shows you how A led to B and how B led to C. It doesn't show you what you actually see between A, B, and C. Like the unnecessary humor, the dodgy CGI of the Super Predator, how thinly written and uninteresting the main characters are, and the rather disappointing portrayal of mental disabilities, not just with Rory's autism, but also with Tourette's syndrome with a character played by Thomas Jane, which is suddenly cured by being in a firefight. Which reminds me, we also see a waste of a really great cast. You have Thomas Jane from Punisher 2004, Albie Allen from Game of Thrones, Sterling K. Brown for Supernatural, Black Panther, and This Is Us, Jacob Tremblay from Room, Trevante Rhodes from Moonlight. These are all great actors who could have done great work and aren't given anything to do. But on the plus side, Shane also at least makes decent use of Keegan-Michael Key from Key and Peele as a kind of comedic foil to Thomas Jane. And the action is actually kind of okay. It's not great, but there's far worse in other movies. This isn't a good movie by any stretch, but it's Citizen Kane next to one other particular entry in this series. The worst part of this movie isn't anything that's actually in it. It's the fact that the bad press generated by the controversy over Steve Wilder's presence in the film probably helped this film tank at the box office. It made over $160 million worldwide against an $88 million budget, which sounds okay, but keep in mind that doesn't include the cost of reshoots or marketing, which I'm going to guess probably adds on another $60 million, which eats further into the $160 million profit. And the controversies and behind-the-scenes drama aside, this movie just feels like a lazy mashup of the previous films without what made those movies cool. It has a cast of badasses in the military, but none of them have even half the chemistry as a team from John McTiernan's Predator. It takes place outside a jungle like Predator 2. It doesn't use any of the more unique environment like that movie did, though. It has a brief conflict between an OG Predator and an even bigger and stronger Predator, like in Predators. But instead of a 6'5" actor in makeup duking it out with a 6'7" actor in makeup, it's a 6'9" actor in makeup being tossed around by a 10-foot tall CGI character, which just isn't as cool. And that's basically this movie in a nutshell. A Predator movie that just isn't that cool. And that's especially disappointing knowing that this director was in the first movie back in 1987. I'm going to give The Predator a 2 out of 5. A disappointing way to cap off a retrospective aside, something we're all too familiar with on this channel, the Predator series is really fantastic. 3 out of 4 is a decent average in any book, especially when one of the 3 is an action classic and the other 2 are a pair of underrated gems, with some just plain kick-ass action and some pretty cool characters. Pretend that the Predator doesn't exist, and you'll be content with a pretty fantastic little trilogy of sci-fi action films with a pinch of horror. And if you don't want to pretend that The Predator doesn't exist, you still have these 3 movies and a below-average science fiction action film with a big dash of comedy that maybe you'll like more than I did. So, I'm going to give the Predator franchise, the AVP duology excluded, a 4 out of 5. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. And if you did, like this video, comment if you feel so inclined, and subscribe to my channel. If you like what you saw here, check out some of my previous reviews. This is my first time discussing a straight-up science fiction series, but I've previously discussed a lot of comic book movies up until this point. Said movies have been Zack Snyder's Watchmen, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Justice League, Black Panther, Deadpool 2, Venom, Blade, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, the aforementioned Alita Battle Angel, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Shazam, Neil Marshall's Hellboy, Aquaman, and Avengers Infinity War, plus reviews for the original Watchmen comic by Alan Moore, the video game Marvel Ultimate Alliance, which Disney and Marvel will be releasing a sequel to, actually this month. I'll be dropping my thoughts on the Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator Requiem movies in a separate video next. And then I'm finally going to talk about something I started teasing back in fucking April. My next 2 reviews are going to be for Aquaman and Shazam, followed by a brief chat about HBO Asia and Hulu Japan's unique television adaptation of Sherlock Holmes. I have a few more videos in the pipeline that are coming out later this year. One video that I have sitting on the back burner is about Hulu Japan and HBO Asia's new series from last year, Miss Sherlock. After I finish this Predator kick 'em on, I am finally going to discuss Hulu Japan and HBO Asia's Miss Sherlock. Hey everyone, what's Doctor in the Future again, and I'm here to tell you that I won't actually be covering Miss Sherlock next, because Marvel had the audacity to announce this.
Do you feel that? Oh, shit.
Yep, that's right. Mahershala Ali is gonna be Blade. And with that information, I decided that I ought to review the other two Wesley Snipes Blade movies, just as prep for whenever they drop the reboot. Hopefully it's good. If it's not, well, we still have two kick-ass movies with Wesley Snipes. We don't talk about Trinity. Except now, because that's what I'm going to do. But after that, I am going to discuss Miss Sherlock. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, check out all my other content. Links to all those videos will be in the description below. Have a great day, everyone. Woodstock, out.